It is live.
And we're live. Okay, I am Tarzan K, crypto newbie, and I'm here with Tamron Sheriffs, and I am her protege. Tamron, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tamron, and this is our Crypto Queens episode. I have been obsessed with cryptocurrency for the last couple of years, but intensely so for the last year, and I'm really excited to share all of my discoveries.
And I'm excited to hear your discoveries because I have a lot of questions.
Yay!
We are both moms, we're both entrepreneurs, and both so stoked about crypto. So on our last show, we talked about, you told me that only 4 to 8% of crypto is owned by women, and I nearly fell out of my chair. That's so crazy, and we are going to change that. So this is such a good one that we're going to talk about today. I hear this all the time. I know you hear this all the time. And the conversation goes like this. Hey, do you want to like save on fees or like, circumvent the banks? You should use crypto. And then that person goes, I prefer to use a currency that's backed by something.
Oh my goodness. I have heard this chestnut so many times. And I'm really grateful and happy that we're talking about it, particularly from somebody's point of view who's operating a business, because I have made the comment, hey, if you're struggling with fees, this service provider charges X amount and it's ridiculous, you should consider either accepting crypto payments or just operating in crypto. And I always get that response. So it's really important for us to just have a quick conversation around why it is that people believe that. Why they need to use a cryptocurrency, a currency that's backed by something. And it stems from,
Before you go into that, maybe we need to make the distinction between fiat currency and cryptocurrency, because when people say that, they're referring to fiat currency, which they perceive as being backed by something.
Yes, exactly. That's an excellent point. When they say I prefer to use a currency that's backed by something, they're talking about what we all understand to be money. And it's important that we make this definition, thanks, Tarzan, is that when we talk about money, US dollars, South African rands, Australian dollars, Canadian dollars, that is technically called fiat currency. And in fact, the definition of fiat currency is a little bit what we're talking about today. Fiat currency means a currency that's backed by government and issued by government. But somehow in our minds, when we think about money, paper money, dollars, we think that that's a representation of some kind of store of value somewhere. We don't often actually think of money as just an exchange of value. Like, say, for example, you've got a program that you run, one of your services that you offer to your client. They give you something in exchange for that program, and that's really just an exchange of value, right? And we've been doing that kind of thing forever. Somehow, when we think about money, we think of it more as an exchange of like an object. So people often think that there's some kind of like store of gold in a vault somewhere in a bank, that if you had to take your $100 and give it in at the bank, they would be able to give you gold. But that actually hasn't been the case for the US dollar since the 70s. The gold standard and the US dollar were separated in the 70s. It was a decision made by Nixon, I believe. And a lot of people don't realize that since then, the US dollar and any other currency that's influenced by that hasn't been backed by an object. So that comes as a big surprise to people, that our current fiat money is not tied to an object that you can, if things go pear, you can just take your note and say, hey, actually give me the real object, the value that this thing is worth. And because we don't realize that, it's hard for us to imagine another currency that doesn't have like a hard object. Is that making sense to you?
Yeah, so that's making sense. And something, maybe you could talk a little bit more about this. Something that I've read is about how governments print more money, which devalues what we currently have. And I guess that's what inflation is. I'm not entirely sure. But I think that's important to address too, is like even the money that the government says today is worth $100, tomorrow could be worth significantly less. And even in some countries, like I think it was Argentina or something, they just like knocked a couple of zeros off their money and suddenly everyone was like poor.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So that is exactly what inflation is. So without even having to understand like the complexity of the monetary policy, one of the things you have to understand is that a government, because fiat currency is government issued, governments can make a decision about how much of that currency, how much of that money is going to be in circulation at any moment. And in order to adjust for interest rates and a couple of other things, they just introduce more money into the economy. They print more money, literally. And that means that your $1 today might buy, a certain amount of groceries, but that same $1 in 10 years would buy so many less groceries. You must have heard your grandparents talk about, back in my day, I used to use, and they would give like some crazy small amount, or even like the cost of my parents' house when they bought it, you couldn't even buy like a shoebox now. And that's because of inflation. So one of the things that people don't realize about inflation is that it's actually a kind of tax on people who've been saving for their whole life.
Totally.
If you have been saving for your retirement and you think you've got this nest egg of money that should have a certain purchasing power, should be able to buy a certain number of things, and you're living in a very like hyper-inflated environment, which is happening in a lot of countries, then it can happen to you that you don't even have a retirement anymore. I live in South Africa, and one of our neighboring countries, Zimbabwe, in the last decade went through the roof in terms of hyperinflation. You literally had to take a wheelbarrow full of cash to the store to get a loaf of bread. And in fact, my husband's grandparents all live with their children now because their pensions evaporated.
Wow.
So that's the danger.
That's what it's backed by.
Yeah. So to come back to the first question, fiat currency is backed by government, and that is only as stable as a government is, and it's based on your trust in the government and your trust technically that the government's going to pay its debt back. To summarize.
But it can go even a level deeper, because in the US, now I'm Canadian, you're South African, but of course we follow what's happening in the US.
Yes.
In the US, the Federal Reserve is independently owned. So it's not even, that whole system is not backed by the government. The Federal Reserve is independently owned. They decide how much money is getting printed and put out there. And you know who the largest shareholder is of the Federal Reserve? Goldman Sachs, like a bank. It's interesting, like how much faith we put in our money, because I don't know why we do, but
well, because we just don't stop to think about it. So that's a perfect example that we put faith. So these words, faith, trust, consensus is the word you'll hear used in the cryptocurrency world. The reason that cryptocurrency has value is because of consensus. The same kind of maybe blind faith people are having in what's happening in your own countries. It's the same sort of mechanism at play, that we all just agree, we all have a consensus that something is of value. And you want to talk about, just take literally right now in South Africa, our currency, which is South African Rand, has lost tremendous value in the last 3 days because we've got some political shenanigans at the moment. So if you were saving money in South African rands, maybe you're an older person, in fact, my neighbor across the road who I've been helping, his money suddenly just disappeared in value if you are only using one currency, if you only operate in your life in one currency. So that's one of the major reasons why you should be thinking about having multiple stores of value, and one of them should certainly be cryptocurrency.
That's so interesting, especially because you're looking, we've been talking about you looking for a business coach, and it's probably going to be someone in the US, which means you're probably going to be paying them in US dollars. And if you were counting on your savings, that those US dollars just got a lot more expensive. But on the other hand, you could turn some of your crypto into US dollars and pay that person.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. I've been on this path for quite a while, and I've lived in different places in the world, and that's why it's so important to me to have multiple streams of revenue, but also to operate in multiple currencies and to have multiple bank accounts and to have multiple, let's call it monetary systems. So there's this fiat monetary system, and there's these fiat currencies of different places in the world, but then there's cryptocurrency and the various cryptocurrencies that I hold, because particularly, living in a third world country, it would actually be insane to not be thinking that way, because in the top of a hat, the president can make a decision, we're expropriating land without compensation. That means we're taking land back from people who we think didn't get it correctly, colonial-wise. And all the investors go, what? We're taking our money out. And people who have been living here their whole lives, who haven't got other plans, or even young people who haven't got other plans, can really be impacted. And you mentioned this happened in Argentina. This kind of thing happened in Greece recently. People were queuing up at ATMs and there wasn't money inside of them. This isn't like, oh, this will only happen in Africa. Problem is happening increasingly all over the show. So we just need to be mindful that there's ways to sort of future-proof yourself and just diversify your portfolio and make sure that you are keeping your fingers in all of these pies.
Cool, great. Well, that definitely answers that, Tamara, and you told them.
Yeah. Get yourself some cryptocurrency.
Yes. So we're going to be back next week with another live show. And if anyone has questions, Tamara is really good at answering them. I have a lot more questions. So I'm looking forward to the next episode.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.